Senator, welcome back to the program here. The governor now wants to enact these sweeping regulations on data centers. Where do you stand on this?
I think we need to have a big discussion about data centers because they're coming to Texas. We need to look at what or recognize the obvious. There's the points in the governor's plan that have been confirmed by the White House, which is to have the AI data centers bring their power with them. I think another point, Senator Perry's been talking about making sure that they had closed loop water systems in advance. We've heard about these changes as far back as us visiting DC. So I think this will be positively received by those that are trying to develop AI data centers, those two major points. And I think that's going to go a long way to helping everyone recognize the obvious that AI data centers can be brought in without raising electric rates or basically consuming local water supplies ad infinitum.
Senator, back in February, you said that counties cannot individually ban data centers. The governor now wants the legislature to do it statewide, blanket regulations here. Is this something you would vote for?
Well, the point that I made in February was, as the Senate Local Government Committee Chair, I'm recognizing the obvious. Counties do not have the authority to do broad bans of industrial projects. The reason why Representative Patterson and I wrote that letter is because we had about 6 counties that were looking at, AI data center bans. Some people wanted cogen bans. They wanted apartment bans. There was actually people wanting to ban residential subdivisions. And, we had to put basically a foot in the door in this discussion that says you don't have that authority. The bill that Representative Patterson and I passed was to make sure that cities didn't use home rule authority to do it, because they do have the ability to make an ordinance, but there is no fact or supposition of fact that counties can have that power. Because if they did, we'd have 254 different versions of this, like a crazy patchwork quilt all over the state. And what maybe a rural area would do on banning, development would be completely different than what a leftist progressive commissioner's court would do in an urban area. So that's why we wrote the letter. It just happened to be that Hood County was the first one up to use it. And on a 3-2 vote, they voted not to implement a ban and asked for an attorney general's opinion.
But you've seen what the governor is now proposing. Where are you on this issue, though? Is it a concept you could get behind on the surface?
Well, look, on a initial brush, okay, this just came out yesterday. The concept of getting people to bring their own power if they wish to have an AI center is a good one. We actually heard from Peter Lake and Lednick at the White House that was probably an idea that was coming.
And you say power, you're talking about electricity, just to make sure people understand that.
I'm talking about electricity, right.
Sure.
This is an industrial plant, so, they need power generation to operate, okay? Then the other thing they need is an industrial plant. They need processed contact water. They need to be able to cool what they are heating up, okay? So those two ideas we've discussed in advance, and I know Senator Perry is big on the latter. And if you're looking at that as a starting point, I think that there'll be a lot of agreement on it. Now, quite frankly, I haven't had time to look even yet at all the other detailed information. We're not in Senate session yet. But I think recognizing the obvious that AI data centers can be good tools for development, good tools for strategic defense, good jobs, if they bring their own power and they also use closed loop water systems, is a good thing for Texas.
You still sound kind of skeptical to me about all this, though.
Well,
am I reading that right?
Well, I have to laugh because it's skeptical of what? One, counties,
of the governor's proposal, though. I mean,
no. I mean, look, everyone has to get. We knew ERCOT was looking at some of these rules, and it's important to have some top-down guideline framework. So and that's an important part of these type of new industrial developments. The one thing I'm skeptical of for sure is not all these projects are going to be built. One of the real handicaps here is the fact that the supply chain takes years to get cogeneration turbines to be able to produce electricity, even longer to get step down transformers to use in that process. We're looking at 3, 4, 5 year supply chain long lead items. So yes, I'm skeptical because I know one thing: not all these projects are going to be built, and it's not skeptical of individual plans or good ideas. It's just the economic reality of what it takes to build one of these centers. You just can't, snap your fingers and have 1 million square feet of industrial development without planning and long-term supply chain management. But the reason why I put my letter out along with Representative Patterson is we could not have counties making decisions to not do residential development, which is actually in the request from the Hood County Attorney General to ask the AG. We can't have counties saying we're not going to do cogeneration. We can't have counties saying we're not going to do, we'll say AI data centers today, because what would take just a minute in a leftist progressive county to ban all industry for all we know. So we need to do this in an orderly fashion. Everybody's got an opinion. We've got a legislative session coming up, but the basic concept, which is at the root of what the governor's trying to accomplish, which is having brought, these projects need to bring their own electricity, AKA power generation, and they need to be looking at closed loop water systems. I think everybody can agree to that.
So top down is probably a good idea, since there are already 470 of these centers in the state.
Well, that's the request we have.
Sure.
Okay. Now, the number of projects that has been approved is dramatically smaller. And part of this is the market trying to sort out how much do we need of AI data centers, how much are strategic defense, and the fact that effectively the first people in are the ones that have the ability to get, quite frankly, the cogeneration they need, or the big, large transformers they need, because this technology is changing so rapidly. Look, when I spent time in the semiconductor business 40 years ago, it used to be it'd take 18 months to double a CPU, how fast it was, its clock speed, its megahertz speed. We're now seeing NVIDIA bring out these new series of chips, which are 200 to 300, that are twice as fast. And these chips are enormously faster than what I did when I was younger. They can do it in 5 months, double the amount of computational power. So we're dealing with a system that is just getting started. It's going to have a tremendous amount of technology change before we get to a lot of these final projects. But not every one of these projects is going to be built. We're not going to be covering, West Texas with data centers. And remember, as big as 1 million square feet sounds like, that's about 22 acres or so of land, and a section of land, 1 million by 1 million, is 640 acres. The problem we've got has been a lot of disinformation about AI data centers. There's people like Bernie Sanders that are opposing it because the White House is for it. There's clearly money and opposition that's coming to it in a grassroots sense. And so what I caution the viewers to do is sort out the wheat from the chaff, look out past the noise, and let's look at the projects that we think are going to happen with top-down guidelines that work.
Is there momentum, do you think, among Texas Republicans to do something when the legislature returns in January?
Oh, there's no question that this is a very hot topic. The House has already had hearings on this, and it's an important discussion for the future. So part of the problem is that people hear so much, and quite frankly, they're just scrolling right now on whatever comes across. They see the headline, boom, AI data centers are bad, whatever. They haven't had a chance to even really understand what it is, the technology we're pitching. And a good example is the big project Fermi up in the Amarillo area started out with a share price that is much, much higher now than when they came out for an IPO than it is now. There is speculation in this market. There are projects that are being discussed that will not be built. There is a very small number of projects that are actually already, not even shovel ready. They're in the process of getting close to that. And I think that's what the framework that I think that Texans can agree on is that if you're looking at these projects, well, what do you want? Well, you want them to bring their own power generation, and you want them to use as much closed loop water supply as they can, so they're not costing ratepayers money and consuming, precious water supplies. So these are rational, boundaries and top-down guidelines. Just like the bill that Representative Patterson and I said is, we don't want cities doing a ban. But again, going back to the earlier point, as the Senate long-term chair of local government, counties do not have this authority. There are AG opinions backing it up. You can't have counties deciding we're going to do away with residential subdivisions or we're going to do away with AI centers. They don't have that authority on the Constitution. We have not given it to them as the legislature. So that process has to stop. And a bona fide is Hill County voted 3-2 to ban an AI data center. They got sued and they turned around within a week and said, oh, no, we've rescinded our ban. There isn't any legal basis for that thought in counties, in my mind, period.
A couple last questions on this. Should the governor call a special session before the legislature reconvenes in January, since this is such a hot topic?
When, the problem is that at this point in time, we're so late into the political process. You've got so many people that are running, new people that haven't been sworn in yet. You've already passed the runoffs. I never say never because that's the governor's, prerogative. I don't actually opine on that. From a practical matter, we're almost just barely a half a year out from being in session.
Yeah.
And remember, these type of guidelines are going to help sort out the projects that are able to move forward versus the ones that are not. And there's so much discussion of this because there's so many individual projects that people are pitching. The reality is they're not going to happen. And again, let me make just a simple point that it takes years now to get a turbine that can generate electricity, aka power, cogen. It takes years to get transformers that are big enough to handle these type of projects. Getting actually the chips is a less of a lead item, but again, those chips have become obsolete so quickly. So part of it is a natural understanding that these are tough projects to actually pull off, and anything under 5 years. And when we went to visit the White House, Peter Lake was very, sympathetic to the power side, the electrical cost problem for users. But also, Commerce Secretary Ludwig was talking about the fact that these are 4 or 5 year lead time. So we've got time to take a breath, get better acquainted with the problem, and have more data by the time we start in January on it. But that's the governor's decision.
Here's what struck me about all this. Republicans in this state, Senator, rarely approve any new sweeping regulations for any industry. I mean, the Texas miracle has really, survived without having industries regulated here. But is this under consideration, do you think? Is the governor pushing this? Are lawmakers talking about this because these are conservative counties complaining?
Well, I think that it's real simple. You've got a new technology that is fairly revolutionary, that has also changing rapidly because its CPU power is doubling every 5 months. So by the time we get back into regular session in January, the CPUs we're talking about now will effectively have been obsolete, okay, or certainly not worth as much. I would say obsolete, but they're going to be replaced by things that are faster. I think the broad concept is what I saw that I think people can recognize. And the broad concept is talking about having power generation with an AI project. I think that's very good public policy. Yeah, I think it's good business because actually, if they bring a big enough cogen unit, they can actually put power onto the grid and sell it. Yeah, but also talking about water, which is what people really worry about. The fact that, saying, look, you've got to use closed loop water systems to cool your plants whenever possible. That's a good industrial practice, and it's a good public policy practice. So we're at the stage where we need to be coalescing around what are good ideas like that. And I think at the basis of whatever plan's done, eventually, I think those are two really good fundamental ideas that everybody should agree to.
But the sheer politics of this, if this was Dallas and Austin and Houston complaining about something, would the legislature consider, enacting sweeping reforms? I mean, it's conservative counties that have been making headlines complaining about this. Is that the reason that Republican leaders are responding as they are?
Well, the reason is because the reason why I wrote the letter with Senator Patterson, you had counties that are about ready to do something that was foolish. It was ultra vires. It was beyond the law. They couldn't ban broad bans of AI data centers or residential subdivisions or all power generation. They don't have that authority. Right. Now, when that gets stirred up to that point, somebody has to stand up and say, look, here are the laws of the state of Texas. And as the Senate chair on local government, I know what they are because we actually said cities shouldn't be able to do it either. So we have to come together and look at this from the standpoint of what works. Well, I know as an old industrial person that what works is you have a good project, you have the right power, you've got good water supply, you're using a closed loop process contact water is what we used to call it on the ship channel industries. And those are good things. And I think that recognition of the obvious helps the public understand that these are not some type of sinkholes where they've got to pay for them and all their water goes down the drain. There are reasons why we're having this discussion because it is the next big frontier. The White House is right when they're talking about the fact that there is a strategic defense reason for these. We are in competition against China. And we're measuring our lead in this area in days, like 27 or 28 days. So it is a big race, but we can win that race and recognize the obvious that we could have AI data centers with cogeneration power for electric consumption they need and water that they can use for process contact water for cooling in a closed loop system. These are good things to do. And it's something the body politic should be discussing really from the biggest county to the smallest county, because there are projects in Harris County where I'm at right now today. And we all have to recognize the obvious about what the laws of the state are, but also recognize what a good framework going forward is.
Senator, we will be watching. Thanks for making time as always.
No, thanks for asking the good questions. It's a complicated project and issue for everyone to understand.